everyone, and welcome to our video tutorial for this cat rose scarf that you can see Melba modelling here. So we hope you enjoy it. Please like, share and subscribe, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks. Bye. Tail. Thanks, Melba. Good job. Good job. Okay, so to make this rose cat scarf, you'll need, of course, some yarn. Now, I'm pushing the upper limits of the weight that's, best for this pattern. I'm actually using a 4 to 5 weight, which, like I said, is kind of pushing the upper limits of the weight that's suitable for this pattern. Probably if you go anywhere sort of down the 2 to 3 weight level, then, you're really good for this pattern. But sometimes I like to do things a little bit differently. I'm going for a more chunky look for this rose scarf. But, if you prefer a finer look, then choose a finer weight yarn. This one is a cotton acrylic, and I love the way it works up, so that's why I'm using it, and I think it looks great with this pattern. I do kind of wish it was slightly finer, but, I'm happy with how it's turned out. So, yeah, choose your yarn. I'm going a bit non-traditional. I'm going the white for the rose and this sort of turquoise bluey green for the leaf and the neck part, the part that goes around the neck. You'll need a crochet hook that corresponds to your yarn, and I'm going a bit smaller than what my yarn recommends. I'm going for a 3.5 millimeter. You'll need a darning needle to weave in your ends. I've got one with a nice big eye because I'm using this heavier weight yarn. You'll need a pair of scissors to snip your ends, and for this pattern a tape measure would probably be recommended, especially if you're going on the upper limit of yarn weight. If you want this to sit well on a smaller animal like a cat, you probably want it to fit quite well around the neck, quite snugly around the neck. So if you've got an accurate measurement of your cat's neck circumference, it's going to be better for this pattern. If you don't and you're using a finer weight yarn, it's not a big deal. You could let this one sit a little bit looser and just work from a recommended cat neck circumference, and you can find a guide to standard cat sizings as far as neck circumference go in the description box below. But it's always a good idea to have on hand a measurement if you've got it. Okay, so here are two that I've made before in the same yarn as what I'm using today. They look just slightly different. This one's slightly smaller than this one. I used a different hook size. I used a slightly larger hook for this one, and I'm going to make the same size as this one here. So I used a 3.5 millimeter hook here and a 4 millimeter hook here. So I prefer this one. So I'm going to make this one again in white, and then I've got the same color for the leaf and the neck piece. So to make this, we'll make it in two parts. We'll make it the rose first, and then we'll make the neck piece and the leaves. Now, to make the rose, you'll need to know how to slip knot onto your hook, how to create a chain, how to single crochet, and how to double crochet. And then we'll just employ a few basic hand sewing techniques to sew this into a rose shape. Then we'll tie onto the back with our second colour, or you can continue with the same colour, no problem at all if you want to just use the same colour. We'll create this chain, and then we'll make this leaf. So to make the leaf, you'll need to know how to double crochet, single crochet, half double crochet and triple crochet, and then we're adding this little 2-chain picot at the top here to add that little peak on the leaf. And then from there, just weaving in your ends. So it's definitely beginner friendly and approachable for a beginner. Just a reminder, if you need to brush up on any of those techniques before we get started, then please do. And I use US terms. So yeah, apologies to my British friends, but hopefully you can convert those over into your nomenclature. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to get started, take your color that you're using for your rose, and you'll make a slip knot onto your hook, however you do that. Now, here's where you can vary the size of the rose. Okay, so I'm going to chain, you can chain any odd number. Okay, so you can make the rose, it will depend on the yarn that you're using, and I can give you an exact number, but that will correspond to the yarn I'm using and the hook size I'm using and the size of the flower that I want. Okay, so you can make more layers than this. Mine's got about 4 layers, or about, yeah, let's say 4 layers. But you could make it, you know, a lot more layers if you wanted to, especially if you're using a finer weight yarn. You can definitely make more layers. It's entirely up to you what size you make your rows. Now for my, you know, variations, so my hook size, my yarn size, etc., I'm going to chain 41. Okay, well there's Melba's here on that already. So you can chain any odd number, okay, any odd number that you like. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 41. Oops. 2 and 3 and 4. So I'm going to finish that off camera. Now, if you've got a finer weight yarn than me, you could chain, you know, like 51, say 49. You could, if you've got a really fine weight yarn and you want to, you know, a rose with lots of layers, you could chain more than that. You could chain, you know, like 55 or, you know, 59, or really any odd number will work for this pattern. Just have those things in mind. Compare your yarn to my yarn. Like I said, mine's about a 4 to 5 weight cotton acrylic blend. I'm using a 3.5mm hook. Take into account how big your cat is. If you're doing this for a kitten, obviously you want quite a smaller rose, or a smaller cat, you want a smaller rose. If you're doing it for a larger cat, or a different animal, a large animal like a dog, then you might want to chain extra. So you have to kind of take all those things into account and make an estimate of how much you'll need. Now it doesn't have to be perfect, so just run with what you think. Like I said, I'm chaining 41. So I've got 4 there. I'm going to continue on and make 41. And just once again, I'll just bring in my rose. This is how my rose looks, okay? With 4 layers. And you can wind it tighter, so you can wind it tighter to be even tighter than mine, So it's entirely up to you. So make that estimate of how many chains that you want, and it'll be fine. Just just estimate it according to those different factors and make your chain, and I'll see you after I've done mine. Okay, so I've got my chain of 41, and you'll have your chain, an odd number of chains, however many you've chained. Now don't overthink it. Just go with your instinct according to those factors that I described before, and chain an odd number and see what happens with your rows. Okay, so I've got like I said, I've got 41 chains, and you'll have your number of chains, but we're going to follow the same pattern regardless of the number of chains. So we're going to start working along our chain, and we're going to start in the 5th chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the 5th chain, place a double crochet. So we're going to work V stitches down this chain, and this counts as your first V stitch. Okay, so you've got a turning chain of 3 and 2 chains in the center of the V, and this is your other side of the V. Okay, and then we're going to continue along. We're going to skip 1 and place a double crochet in the next stitch along, or next chain along. Chain 2, and then in that same chain another double crochet. So just creating these little V stitches. So regardless of how many chains you've got, chain 1, sorry, no chain here, I beg your pardon, skip 1 is what I wanted to say, and then double crochet into the next chain, chain 2, and then double crochet back into that same chain. And my yarn split slightly there, so I'm just going to go back and fix that. So that's basically what you'll do along, okay? So you'll skip 1, and then you'll place a V stitch in the next chain along, and the V stitch is a double crochet, chain 2, and then double crochet in that same chain. Okay, so regardless of how many chains you've got, go ahead and finish that off. Now if you get to the end and you find you've skipped accidentally one of the chains, and you haven't got enough at the end, you know, it's not a big deal, okay? Because when we make the rows, if you've, you know, accidentally, you know, missed a chain somewhere or skipped 2 by accident, it's not a big deal because that end will be hidden underneath the bottom of the rows. Okay, but anyway, we'll talk about that a little when I get down the end of this chain. So you'll just go along your chain, that skip 1, V-stitch in the next chain, all the way down to the end. And if you end up with, you know, 1 more chain than you needed, I'll show you a way you can just undo that, okay, or 1 less chain than you needed. So continue along. I'm going to continue with my V-stitches, chain 2, double crochet, and then skip 1 and move along to the next chain. Okay, so I'm going to finish that out, and you'll see that it's starting to sort of curl already. Okay, it's gonna naturally curl into a shape for us. So you finish off that row 1, finish off your V-stitches, and I'll see you at the end. Okay, so apparently I haven't skipped or missed any chains. So I've got 1 to skip, and then I'm going to work into my last chain. Now, if you've accidentally got 3 at the end here, then no big deal. What you can just do if that happens, if you just undo your little knot, and it'll just, you know, it'll just, it sounds like you're undoing the knot, but it'll just reset itself and undo one chain. Okay, so you can do that, or just, you know, just skip 2 at the end here and work into the 3rd chain. It's not a big deal. Like I said, it'll be hidden underneath the rows, so it's not a big deal. Okay, so yeah, I'm finishing off my last V-stitch here, chain 2, and V-stitch. Okay, actually at this end it'll be hidden in the top of the row. So, you know, either way it's not a big deal. Okay, now we're going to move on to row 2, the final row. So you'll chain 2 here and turn, and then in each of these V-stitches we're going to place 8 double crochets. Now your chain 2 will count as your first double crochet in this first one, okay, even though it's, you know, it's not actually in the chain space. So in this first one, place 7 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to get a bit crowded in there. 5, 6, and 7. So including our chain 2, we've got 8 double crochets in there. And then in this space in between the 2 V-stitches, we're just going to single crochet. And then we're going to move along to the next V-stitch in that 2 chain space. We're going to place 8 double crochets. So that's how we're going to move along. In the 2 chain space in the V's, we're going to place 8 double crochets. And if you need to sort of move them along to get all of them in there, it does get a bit crowded, as I said, but it needs to. So we get that curving effect naturally for the rows. And then in the space, there's no chain space or anything, but in that little gap there, between the 2 V-stitches, we single crochet. So you'll move all the way down your work to the end, just repeating that same pattern, and I'll meet you once we get down the end here. Okay, so that's what we end up with. Once you've worked each of those V-stitches with your 8 double crochets, and of course don't forget that last bit. Now we're going to tie off here, but you want to leave a bit of a tail in that you can sew with, so leave a bit longer tail than normal. And you can snip off that end. we're going to start shaping this into our rose. So start at the end with your beginning tail, and we're just going to, so you get to shape this however you want to shape it, and you just will create layers around like so. And you can, you can arrange your petals however you want them to fall. I find that for me they kind of just fall naturally anyway, so I tend to just kind of leave them where they fall. And what I do with this tail, this beginning tail, is I feed it through. So I put, just before I start sewing, I just push my hook up and through, and I just draw that down through to the other side. And also what I use that to do is to kind of pull that, see that top bit into shape there? And I pull that down. Okay, so I've kind of got it where I want it to be, and I'll just take my darning needle and I thread the long tail end with my darning needle, or thread my long tail end into my darning needle. Now it'll depend on the exact yarn you're using, but with this yarn my roses tend to kind of sit on their own. I almost don't need to sew them. But what I do is I just put a few stitches. I come up from the bottom up into the top here, and I just sew with a few stitches. So obviously you can't go back down exactly where you've come, but I just will come across a little bit and pull down, and then I'll go back up. So I'll just sew the layers together. Weaving up and down. So you can sew this however you want to sew it. I find for me this is enough, just to go up and down a few times through the layers. And you can attach that. Now, like I said, I just see how I sort of pull on this short tail, the beginning tail, and it sort of pulls down the center, so it shapes the center there, and then I can just secure that with a stitch. It gives me that nice shape of the rose at the top there. So that's looking pretty good. And then what I'll tend to do is I'll finish off by bringing that tail through close to this other one and tie a knot to secure that there. So it's really easy to sew these together. You just work up and down. So that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with the shape of that. Just tie that in a simple double knot, and then you'll just weave in those tail ends into the bottom here. So just weave them into the stitches. I just go up into one of the sets of 8 double crochet in the back there, pull through, and then I'll double back. So I kind of assume that you know how to weave in your ends, and super easy to weave these ends in. Got plenty of spaces, and also it's underneath, so it's going to be completely hidden. So that's one done. So I'm going to do the second one off camera, and you do the same, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so there I've got my rose all sewn, and if you need to shape it a little bit more, then of course you can, but I think that looks pretty perfect. So now we're going to make the neck piece. So let's just show you on my previous one. Let's push that back through. we're going to make the neck piece, this little loop at the back and the leaf. Okay, so take your leaf colour and we're just going to tie on with the leaf colour underneath here. So kind of think this through just a moment. So look for two places where you can have something opposite. So see, like, because we want to tie it onto one side and then come across to the other side so we can create this loop to feed the leaf through. Okay, so for me, think here, see this little loop here, and here will be good. So let's tie on here. Now how I tie on is just really simply, you can tie on however you want to tie on. And you can even, if you don't want to tie on to these bits here, you could tie on to, you know, these bits here and create a much longer loop across here. It's entirely up to you. So if you're using, you know, just to give you an idea of how your leaf size will compare to your flower, it's about the same. It's going to work out about the same, sort of diameter across. If you use the same hook size and yarn size that you used for your rose, it's going to work out about the same diameter across as your rose. So you want to be able to, here you're going to have to make a little estimate as well, but you want to be able to, like, obviously you'll be able to fold your leaf, but you want to make sure that it'll fit through. And you only need a surprisingly small hole actually to fit that through. You can see, look, it almost looks like it won't fit through, but you can just shimmy it through because it's soft and pliable. So I'm going to tie on here, and like I said, I'll show you how I tie on. So I just place my yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, and I chain one to secure it. So if you've got a different way that you tie on, please do it your way. And then I'll just pull on that tail to tighten. And we're going to make a chain across to the other side. So again, you'll have to estimate the size that you want for your chain. I'm going to do 8 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So when I come across here, you can see that I've got that amount of loop, and that's going to be plenty for my leaf. Okay, so just remember that it's going to be this sort of diameter, not as thick as this flower, so you don't need as much size as the flower, but it's about the same diameter. So I'm going to come across here and I'm going to single crochet across on the other side to secure it over on the other side. Now that 8 chains is just an arbitrary number. You choose the number of chains that you need to for the size that you think you need. And allow a little bit extra, but you don't want it to be too big, obviously, and you don't want it to be clearly not too tall or too small. So you have to make a little bit of an estimate there. And then we're going to chain from here, 2, 3, and 4. So actually you don't need to count them here, but you're going to chain according to your cat's neck circumference now. Okay, so if you're making a chunkier version like me and you want it to sit well, you're going to have to be pretty close to the exact measurement of your cat's neck circumference. Okay, so the measurement will go from where the sort of center of the flower is to, you see where this finishes in the center of the leaf. Okay, so that measurement needs to be pretty close to the exact measurement of your cat's neck circumference if you're using a chunkier yarn. If you let this sit too loose, it'll be too big and it'll just kind of flop. If you're using a smaller weight yarn, your rose won't be as heavy, so it'll sit a little bit better. You don't need to be quite as exact. But I'm going to go, and because you can, you don't have to fit this over your cat's head, you can just place it on once it's around the cat's neck. You don't have to allow that extra leeway to place it over your cat's neck. So I'm going to go, so when I finish my chain, it's going to be so Melba's neck circumference is about 24 centimeters. It's going to be 25 centimeters. I don't want to allow really any extra. Okay, I've allowed 1 centimeter there, but that's, you know, even that's going to be plenty, I think. So, you know, you allow an extra centimeter or two. The less you can leave, the better, and that'll depend on how. If you want it to sit really low, of course, you know, make it a little bit longer. But because of this chunky yarn, and it's, you know, it just sort of flops if I make it too loose around her neck. I want it to sit almost like not a choker, but you know what I mean, like a choker necklace. So it's obviously not choking her, but it sits quite snugly around her neck. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish off that chain for the neck part, and then we'll come back and we'll make the leaf together. So pause here and I'll meet you in a moment. Okay, so I've got the length I need there, and it's just over 24 centimeters. And I'm also allowing, because I've got quite a bit of stretch actually in this yarn, so it'll depend also on the yarn that you're using. So yeah, I've got just over 24 centimeters. It's like 24.5 centimeters, and that's going to be fine for Melba. So once you've got the length that you want for the neck piece, you're going to chain an extra 3. And then you're going to slip stitch into the 4th chain to create a loop. Okay, and we're going to be working into the center of that loop. So make sure you can find the center there. We're going to work into the center of that loop. We're going to chain 2. And we're going to place 14 double crochets into the center of the loop. Now what you'll have to do, so place 3 or 4 into that loop. 1 and 2. It's a bit sticky for me because it's hot here in Marseille. 3. And by the time you get around to about the 4th one, you're going to have to start, so move that chain out the way, and you're going to have to start sort of working around the other side of the chain. Okay, so you'll have to work your way around that loop. So go ahead and place your 14, and it's going to be a little bit, you know, it's going to be a little bit dense in there as well. So place your 14 double crochets around, so your chain does not count in this case. Okay, it doesn't count as a stitch. So place 14 double crochets into your little loop there, and I'll meet you once I've done mine. Okay, so I've got my 14 double crochets in that loop. Now it gets a little bit sort of tight in there, so if you need to sort of move things around, then do to fit all your 14 in there. Now, we're not going to slip stitch here, okay? We're just going to start, ignore the chain, and we're going to start working again in that first stitch. So in that first stitch, we're going to place a half double crochet. Excuse me for a moment. Half double crochet. And then 2 double crochets in that same stitch. And 2. In the next stitch, 2 double crochets. Sorry, my hands are very sticky and sweaty here. 1 and 2, so it makes it a little bit tricky to work. In the next stitch, 2 double crochets. In the next stitch, 1 double crochet and 1 half double crochet. So double crochet and then a half double crochet. In the next stitch, 2 single crochets. In the next stitch, half double crochet and double crochet. So half double crochet and then a double crochet in that same stitch. And then in this next stitch, which is our sort of center point, we're going to double crochet and then triple crochet. So we're putting 3 stitches in this stitch, triple crochet, and that's our center point. And then we're going to double crochet back into that same stitch. And now we're basically just going to mirror what we've done working down the other side. So we're going to do a double crochet in the next stitch, and then a half double crochet in that same stitch. Then 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2, half double crochet and double crochet in the next, half and then a double, 2 double crochets in the next, and then again in the next 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, and then 2 double crochets and 1 half double crochet in this last stitch here, and half double crochet. Now in this stitch here, just in the center here, we're just going to slip stitch into that center stitch, and then we're going to work our way around with 1 single crochet in each stitch. So starting in this first stitch until we get to the triple crochet at the top there. So keep working all the way around until you get to the triple crochet in the center here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and work 1 single crochet in each stitch until I get to the triple crochet. So I'll see you around here. Okay, so I'm around here at the triple crochet, so this center point here. So you're going to single crochet in there as you've done before, then chain 2, and we're going to picot. So a picot is working through a slip stitch. So you can see here at the base of that chain you've got 2 loops, these 2 here. You're going to insert your hook and slip stitch through those 2 loops to create the picot. Okay, and then you're going to single crochet back into that same stitch, and then continue your single crochets around the other side. So all the way down until you get back to this slip stitch here. Okay, so you work your 1 single crochet all the way down, and I'll meet you down here. Okay, so I'm just placing my last single crochet in there, and then into the slip stitch from the last round. I'm just going to slip stitch again and then yarn over and pull through, leaving a tail to weave in. So just snip that tail end, and then you're just going to weave that tail into the back, and this one here too. Now with this one, so I'm going to assume that you know how to weave this one, and you'll just weave it into the back of the leaf. With this one, this tie-on tail, I'll show you what I do with this one. You can weave it into the back of the rose if you want to, but what I tend to do is I just tend to weave it through where I tied on. Just weave it in here, and then I make a little knot with it by feeding my needle back through there, and I just do that a couple of times. So you can weave that one in as before, you know, into the back of the rose, because it doesn't matter, even if it's a different colour, you're not going to see it at the back there. But I like to just tie a couple of knots in there, and then I can just snip that off. And you can double check that your leaf fits through. Hopefully it does. Mine easily fits through, so no problem. And then I'm going to go ahead and weave in this last tail end, and I'll see you in a moment. Okay, so I've woven that end into the back of the leaf, and I've just pulled that tail quite tight here to give that little shape at the base here. And then I'll just snip off that excess. And there's our little rose scarf finished. So I think this is really pretty. So you'll just feed, as I said before, you'll just feed this through, and that creates your loop. Obviously once it's on your cat's neck, and you just work it so that the leaf sits towards the front underneath the rose. And there's your little rose cat scarf. And you might need to just flatten out that leaf a little bit. But there it is. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I think this is really pretty. It would look great as a Valentine's Day thing in red and green. But you know, I've gone a bit, as I said, non-traditional with these colours. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Please, you know, I'd love to see what yarn you've used and what colours you've used for yours. So please send along your photos to catventurous.community@gmail.com, or you can tag us on social media at catventurous.crochet. So thanks very much for being here, and we hope to see you soon. Okay, bye. Hi everyone, and welcome to our video tutorial for this rose cat scarf that you can see Melba modelling here. She's purring. It's a bit big, this one, but we went chunky look today. She doesn't mind though. She's such a good girl.